He was the youngest regional manager of the company at the age of just 32. I think in that era, for an entrepreneur to get funded was extremely difficult. I think bank interest rates were like 20% plus.
Your father, Mr. M.V. Gokarn, founded Triton way back in 1975. What was the inspiration behind him going into this sector, and what was the background, and how did the initial years were?
Yeah, so my father was a mechanical electrical engineer. Those days it was not uncommon to be dual qualified. So he grew up in a small town, Karwar, in coastal Karnataka. Went to College of Engineering, Pune, finished his bachelor's there, and then he went to England to do what was then called apprentice training, right? So worked in a lot of, I would say, British companies those days. This is probably like the early 50s, right? And then when he came back to India, he got a job with a company called AEI. So AEI those days was like a British blue chip company making electrical equipment. He was posted in Calcutta. He was the youngest regional manager of the company at the age of just 32, right? So when he was in Calcutta, you know, I think India was in this license Raj era. Entrepreneurship was not encouraged. You needed a license even to increase your capacity. So my father used to joke that, you know, all the top executives working in Calcutta those days, which was the industrial hub of India, used to gather in Calcutta Club in the afternoons, while away the hours, you know, chatting, drinking tea, because, you know, there was no pressure to grow. There was nothing, you know, nothing to be done really, because you just had to keep, the show had to keep going on just like every other day. There was no pressure to grow, to improve. And I think that kind of, that pinched him. He thought, you know, this is not a good thing. You know, having trained so well, having, you know, done so well in his career up to there, he felt that, you know, he had to do something, he had to contribute something to the country. Also, I think he had a lot of exposure to know that, you know, India had huge potential, a huge market, huge population, you know, quality of life had to improve at some point of time. So, so he came in contact there with the Dunlop company. Dunlop was the only tyre manufacturer those days. They had a factory in Shahganj. So he used to meet some of the top executives of Dunlop, and they used to tell him about, you know, this little product called a tyre valve that they were struggling with because there was only one supplier in the market. And looking at his, you know, passion and, you know, his itch to become an entrepreneur, some of his friends said, hey, why don't you make this, you know, because there's only one player in the market and we are struggling with quality, so maybe this is something that you could do. So I think that was the background in which he came up with the idea of Triton.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, as you said, the tyre valve is such a small little component, and how does that become such a critical piece?
Yeah, I think, see, the tyre itself is kind of a safety critical component, and within the tyre assembly, I think the valve becomes even more critical, because ultimately the performance of a tyre, its load bearing capacity, depends on how much air pressure is there inside the tyre. So the valve is the little, you know, little component which keeps the air sealed inside, and it literally holds up the entire weight of the vehicle. So yeah, it's precision engineering, and in the 60s and 70s, very few companies knew how to make a precision component like this. It's in the same precision class as, for example, the components of watches.
Okay.
Yes, so it is a high precision component, yeah. And those days it was considered kind of, you know, technology. You know, you needed, yeah, to machine these very small components, assemble these components. It was not that easy, because, you know, that was an era where you didn't have, let's say, PLC controls, you didn't have sensors, you didn't have, you know, IoT, stuff like that. So in that era, to make these very critical, high quality components in large numbers, in millions, defect free, it was something, you know, different. It was high tech.
Very interesting. Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah.
What have you heard about your senior staff or from your family about how the initial years were? What sort of struggles that your dad had to go through, And how did he kind of overcome that, and what was the whole scenario like?
Yeah, so I think, see, my father had a tremendous amount of energy. He was a very passionate, intense kind of a person. And the initial challenges were obviously, the technology itself, funding. I think in that era, for an entrepreneur to get funded was extremely difficult, right? I think bank interest rates were like 20% plus, right? Nobody would, there was no, I would say there was no risk appetite in the country. There was no encouragement given to, let's say, entrepreneurs, industrialists. I think that in that era, my mother always says that even the government viewed profit as something bad, right? It was kind of a socialist era where there was a dream that India should be a socialist egalitarian society. So there was no encouragement for somebody who wanted to be quote unquote a capitalist, right? So the challenges ranged from technology, product manufacturing, finance, raising money, getting licenses. So it was a very difficult thing to get licenses, right? So my father had to go to Delhi for every small little thing, So small approval, you would have to go all the way to Delhi. So hard times, I would say, very, very hard times. I would say that in that era, nobody in their right mind would leave a job like my father had in AEI, beautiful bungalow. He had an ambassador car from the company. He had staff in his home. He had driver, cook, whatever, caretaker. Leaving that kind of a lifestyle and jumping into the entrepreneurial fray, I think it's something that very, very few people would have done at that point. So my father actually incorporated the company as a public company, which was quite rare in that era. Why did he do that? He actually believed, having worked in England, having seen some of these large British multinationals, he believed that in the long run, right, you needed to create a corporate structure, right, and he was ready to sacrifice his personal interest right at the start to build an institution, not just a tyre valve company, right? So I think the vision was very clear right at the start. My mother always said that he never wanted to build a small private, let's say, a territory for himself, right? So the vision was very, very deep, very futuristic. And then he listed the company within the first 3 years, which again in that era was considered like a minor miracle by itself. So yeah, it's a big story of how he raised funds, how he listed the company, how he, my father had only 1 lakh rupees of his own to invest in the company, and the project cost at that time was 110 lakhs, right? So with 1 lakh of his own money, he basically set up a 110 lakh project at that time. So over the years, we've moved from making valves for tires and tubes to making tubeless valves, and now of course there's TPMS, and our capacities have grown over the years. We started with a very small capacity. Today we have a capacity in excess of 180 million valves per annum. So yeah, so we've had a nice run of growth, and of course we're going to be 50 years this year. It's our golden jubilee year, 2025, and yeah, so the journey has been, I would say, fraught with ups and downs, of course, like any entrepreneurial journey. But I think it's a story of determination, of overcoming odds, handling crises, and yeah, so that's our little story over the last 50 years.
Awesome, awesome. And from the time you entered the company till now, how has been the sales turnover been growing, and what's been the current scale right now?
I don't remember the exact figure, but I think the time that I joined in 2002, we were doing about 30-35 crores in sales, and we just announced our annual results last week. We've done about 490 crores now for FY25.
So 35 to 500 crores over a 20-year period.
Yeah, over a 20-year.
Yeah, 15
over
times.
20, yeah,
roughly. Very unfortunately, he passed away at a very premature age. That I'm sure would have been both from a family perspective as well as from a business perspective, a fairly difficult time. You spoke about your mother, etc. I believe at that time she kind of stepped in and effectively took over, although she was actually a teacher, right? She didn't have any experience or background in engineering or whatever. How did that transition happen, and how do you therefore see the role of your mother in this whole journey of transition and going through very difficult times?
Yeah, I'd say that the first thing that my father actually did, which is I think a great learning for us even today, he had set up a very good team. So the company was incorporated in 1975. We went into production in 1978. It took 3 years to raise funds, build up the factory, order the equipment, put everything in place in those days. So 78 we went into production, and by 83, 84, my father had set up actually a very good team. So when tragedy struck, I would say that the team kind of rallied around my mother, right? My mother had a little, I would say, a small little plus point, a silver lining, if you like to call it. We had a technical collaboration between 1978 and 1983 with a French company who gave us some initial technology, drawings and all of that. And my father had negotiated with them in a manner that they would not be given any stake in the company. They were only paid technology transfer fees. So all the technical information had to be translated from French to English. And my mother, had picked up French as a hobby when she was a student, right? So my father requested her, to translate all the drawings and technical information. So in that period of, I would say, 78 to 83, my mother had become familiar with the technology, right? She would communicate directly with the French side. So even though she was not an engineer by training, she was a lecturer at Shikshayatan College in Calcutta. She was an English lecturer there. So, but she translated all the documents. So I think that gave her a little bit of, I would say, a running start maybe to taking on this job. But I think personally I think that it's something that perhaps women can do much better than men, because in a crisis, I was 6 years old, my brother was 9 years old. So she had to take care of 2 children, run the company. The company was in a mountain of debt at that point of time. So it required, I would say, tremendous courage, tremendous belief, right? To think that she could make it happen. So yeah, I would say amazing story of inspiration, and I think my mother did a really fantastic job. So
outstanding and extremely inspiring, I should say. And through this entire thing, the staff was very much there, and they were there to support your mother in terms of the day-to-day working and things like that, right? So they were only looking for leadership, which she so ably provided, right? Wow, very inspiring story.